artists around the world, teaching artists around the world, artists around the world, teaching artists around the world, artists around the world, teaching artists around the world, artists
Let's get going.
around the world.
Let's get going. Shall we get going? Sure. Welcome, Claes Gabriel, our dear friend.
Hi.
You are a visiting artist at the Alternative Art School, our disembodied global campus. We have these things once a week, so it's a delight to have you. You are a Philadelphia-based artist. I'm going to read a little bio of you, and then we'll get going, if that's okay with you. I got this off the Paradigm website, so if there's anything you feel
Oh,
is...
that's pretty good. My website is down right now, so that's perfect.
Okay, cool. Here, let me read this. So Claes Gabriel is a Philadelphia-based artist from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Immigrated to the States in '89 and earned a BFA in painting and sculpture from the Maryland Institute College of Art, 1999. He has three-dimensional paintings ring with spiritual energy of beings from folklore and his own imagined tales. He also does two-dimensional works, one of which you see right behind him right there. Gabriel's first influence was his father, classically trained painter Jacques Gabriel, whose lush images of peasant life in Haiti depicted the commonplace in the vibrant modernist language of the extraordinary. It's a delight to have you, Claes, with us. Hi, Naja, welcome. Hey, what's up, DDM? How's it going? All right, so we're going to do a little interview with you, and then I'd love to hear questions from the students. Claes, let's dig into your work. Let's just start with, it's been a pandemic. I always like to start with the pandemic. The school is a child of the pandemic in so much as we decided to produce community online, and it's kind of grown from there, but certainly it's affected artists. I wanted to see how's the last few years been for you as an artist?
Whoa, that's pretty broad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty broad. Can you get a little bit more specific?
Well, so have you, I know you've moved from you've been working.
Right. So, yeah, no, that helps out a lot. I feel like before the pandemic happened, I was living in my studio or spending a lot of time in my studio. And I think pandemic really changed that. A lot of friends sort of left the warehouse lifestyle and just just made sure to stay somewhere secluded from people. And it definitely changed a lot for me as far as warehouse living and studio space, because a lot of artists couldn't afford both and then want to go to both places, so I definitely think on a practical level, it totally changed the whole thing.
Now, I want to kind of get some work in front of folks too. It's, I know that your Haitian upbringing is important to your work itself, but you also are, you told me, I don't know, when we were drunk, I think that you're named after Claes Oldenburg. Is this correct?
Absolutely. It's definitely been something that has haunted me since childhood. Yeah, my father spent some time in Paris and apparently hung out with Oldenburg and Giacometti and some of the guys from that era. And he named me, a Haitian kid in Haiti, after Claes Oldenburg. And because we speak French, we pronounce it Claes, which made sense to me, but really gave me problems in art school because everyone knew it as Claes. But it definitely shaped the way I thought about being an artist, because Oldenburg's work kind of made sense in a whimsical way. I mean, how do you not laugh at the cherry or the clothespin or just how big and silly they are? But it shaped me because my father wasn't around, but I had to wonder, why was he named me after this guy? Like, what intrigued him? And I've always been in love with him. I know that's definitely a reason why Philly became a home. I would trek here just to look at the clothespin and some of his work that's in Philadelphia.
Well, let's talk about your kind of trajectory to Philly. We are in Philly, and Philly is not always the easiest city for artists. It's, in so much as it's a great place to get space to work. It's not necessarily a great place for people to see your work all the time. But how did you find your way to Philly, and how has it been?
Well, I think it's the opposite. I think it's a great place for artists because it's strategically placed next to New York and DC and all that stuff. You know what I mean? So without having to pay the crazy rent of New York, you're only 2 hours away. So
Yeah.
I ended up in Philly. I went to Micah a few years ago, and I was trying to go to New York to live the artist dream, and I ended up in Philly. Simple as that. Just never made it to New York. It was too expensive. My sister lived there, and I stayed here, and I loved it. Immediately loved it. The moment I rode my bike down the Parkway, I fell in love with it. And later found out that it's one of the most Parisian cities in the United States. I fell in love with Philly immediately.
I love that. I would love to show, do you have around you one of your sculptures that we could take a peek at?
Possibly. Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm gonna have to have Teresa go grab one. Oh, here we go.
There's one standing here that I'm kind of an old one, snake charmer. The sculptures are really, yeah, there it is. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
So yeah.
And wait, just so people understand, they're pretty tall, right? Like, what's the height on that?
What's really helpful? Claes, will you go next to it, stand next to it? So it gives it perspective. It actually is really helpful. Nua did that one time with his big paintings. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize they were so big. Yeah. That's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that is helpful.
And what you can't see is that texture too. It's those little dots are actually like, well, Claes, you could talk about that.
Yeah. But maybe you could talk about, I would love to hear about just the origins of these sculptures in general for you. And then we can get to the two-dimensional work as well.
The sculptures for me started with the idea that here, I'm in Baltimore near Johns Hopkins University. A lot of my friends are studying something more like the scientific method, and they would laugh at me when I explain art school because I thought it was a joke, like it keeps going around circles. It doesn't really go linear like a lot of other studies go. And I said, that's an interesting way of looking at it. So it really got me stuck with shaped canvas artists. Frank Stella, Ellsworth Kelly. I said, perhaps we stopped looking at that and we went right back to what we were doing. So I fell in love with those guys. I'm not kidding you. I started falling in love with the idea of making stretchers that were extremely complicated, extremely complex. I felt like 80% of the painting was in the structure. And eventually they came off the wall and they became freestanding. But I really looked at them as shaped canvases, three-dimensional paintings that were also celebrating tribal and African mask and that whole lineage of work, but continuing a shaped canvas conversation that took place and started back in the 60s. And
everyone's asking what they're made of, Claes.
Wood and canvas, just like a painting would be. So I make the structures out of wood. I shape them and I get rid of the edge like you would bevel something so that a thick piece of wood would look just like a thin line. And I stretch the canvas and sew it and make sure it's as taut as a drum. So it's tight, and then I gesso it and then I paint it. So technically speaking, to me, they're paintings out of like three-dimensional.
When did you when did this occur in your kind of artistic lineage? Because you've been doing these for some time.
Yeah, so I remember my thesis year at Micah, 99. I wanted to do something that was completely different. So I went to one of those antique theaters, and I noticed that the screen was, I don't know if it's concave or convex, but it just curved around, and that blew me away. So I wanted to make a painting that from one end of it, you couldn't see the person standing. So I did a painting that kind of came off the wall really far out. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to spend the next year the next 10 years completely taking it off the wall. So from 2000 to 2010, I really concentrated on wood carving methods and drum sort of like the physics of stretching something that's hollow that gives it more shape, more mass, even though it's completely hollow and it's lightweight. And I think maybe 2000 to 2010, I just started playing around with it until I felt comfortable with taking it off the wall completely to a small mask, to something small. And now I'm just kind of like surfing with it.
Well, you certainly discovered an incredible form, and just for the record, I love them one-on-one, but I also love it when they're in groups. And Teresa, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Claes is so kind as to donate one to us.
Yeah,
I'd love to show too.
I was just going to ask you if you want me to grab it, because it's not that heavy. I could grab it off the wall. Do you want me to grab
That'd
it?
be great. Claes, is it okay if we show the one in our house?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to also ask, someone's asking, did you hand sew this?
Yes, absolutely. I love sewing. I really enjoy all the little steps that happens before you even put gesso on the canvas, all the preparation. That's my favorite part. So if the canvas is not taut enough for me to be able to drum on it, I sew it until it gets really tight.
So just
Oh,
to
there
give
we
you,
go.
do you mind if I show them the back?
No, I don't. Absolutely, I don't.
You can kind of get a sense of how it's put together.
Mhm.
And then
Someone was asking, it's a great question at this point too. How do you decide on the form of your sculptures, Claes? Is there
How
a
do I
meaning
decide on
behind
the
the
form?
shape?
Right. So that's the lucky thing. I find it different. I don't think there's anything more daunting than a blank canvas, especially a square canvas or a rectangle canvas. There's nothing more threatening to me. I'm staring at one right now. It's hard to attack that. But when you start like this, the shape already starts telling you what to do. So when you think about a drum or a cylinder, what you need is two circles and you need a backbone. And all I'm doing is tilting those circles to create something that's more like a mask that can be hung on the wall. So those circles can actually be points. They can be, but they can't really be triangle because you really have to have a surface to stretch the canvas around that gives you volume. So it's kind of like a extension of a circle, and then you could use oval and different shapes, but I'm limited to variations of circles right now.
In terms of your,
I want to
in terms
show
of the,
oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I think
Teresa.
because Claes just mentioned circles, I feel like I should show up close the texture
Yeah.
and the way in which there's like can you tell it's the texture?
It's raised.
They're actually like, will you explain that, Claes, the way you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really into just, I guess, detailed work that puts you in a trance. Because
there you go.
yeah, I really enjoy detailed work that puts you in a trance. So, and I also like animal skin, leopard skin, and I've tried to mimic zebra skins, all kinds of patterns, and I wanted to create a pattern that maybe would exist deep in the ocean or in another planet. So once in Baltimore, I saw these Tibetan monks do the sin paintings that they eventually dumped in the ocean. And that blew me away. It blew me away. And I really enjoyed dropping these very unique dots. And I used a heat gun and a blow dryer to make sure it doesn't lean to the side. And I keep moving the painting around so that it remains like a little mountain. It creates that surface, but it's definitely one of my favorite aspects of the painting, where it's extremely therapeutic. And it's rewarding because at the end, it gives you this effect. It's a way of capturing time. Like it's just a way of capturing time. It's a lot of fun.
Well, clearly you love the process, and that's great to hear. And it's nice to hear you've invented your own, you become a scientist of your own forms, Claes, which is great. Let's talk about the content a little bit. Where do you get, you mentioned a lot of like imagery from different cultures, but do you take on each project with a specific kind of historical reference, or is it more of a amalgamation of different references?
I think it's the latter, and I think it's more intuitive than specific. And the more intuitive I let it be, it's weird how specific it comes out. So I'm not really
Yeah.
trying to do anything, but I'm a Haitian American man living in America. It's a lot of that stuff's going to come out. So with the three-dimensional work, I have less of a goal, less of a plan, but somehow they end up reminding me of Haitian deities or Roman goddesses or something that I've enjoyed reading in the past. And I let that roll out if that's what it's going to be. You know, if I do a piece that reminds me of Medusa, I'm going to title it Medusa, and it's just as simple as that. But the three-dimensional pieces usually don't have any intention at first, because you start out with carving a piece of wood into a shape and you let that tell you what it's going to be.
Love it. I want to move over to the two-dimensional work. You obviously work in two things. And while you had mentioned that the three-dimensional form allows you some freedom or speaks to you, you also meant to mention that you're daunted by the two-dimensional form.
Right.
Nevertheless, you do it quite often.
I have to.
And
I have to. I used to treat it as secondary, as exercise, but I think it's really my primary form of practice. We live in this world where you could press print and have a nice painting printed out, right? So, and I've also heard that AI is making its own paintings. So when I look at a flat canvas, I have to see what's the difference with me and all that stuff. Is the difference is I'm going to put my soul into that painting, right? I'm going to put my soul into that painting. And I feel like there's nothing like looking at a flat painting in person that's done well. That's still really powerful to me when you can see the difference between matte and gloss. You can see the thin lines. And to me, that never gets lost. So there's nothing more romantic than a flat painting to me. I used to see them as exercise for the three-dimensional pieces, but now I see it as the other way around, actually.
Oh my God, I gotta tell you, your love for painting is so infectious. You bring a romanticism to it that I always get caught up in. It's so great. Is it okay, Claes, if we can look at the painting behind you? Just so I know that we're just bringing your
absolutely.
your computer.
I'm working on this one. It's three women. It's about life size, and I'm still working on it. But this one I just finished. This is Going to Church. It's a painting inspired by William H. Johnson. I'm a big fan of the guys from the 30s, the Harlem Renaissance era, and Aaron Douglas, people like Aaron Douglas, people that, I don't know, who just used a lot of design. And I used to look at a lot of this work and say, well, yeah, this is going to really inform me on my shaped canvases. And it's really going to help me figure out shaped canvases. But the more I'm study how courageous it is to attack a flat canvas, the more I want to do the same thing, because it's daunting. It's vulnerable. It's vulnerability at its best.
I mean, I love it. And just if you don't mind, if we can just look at it for a little bit. So, your content is often, whereas your sculptures are somewhat abstract to some degree, not necessarily they have motifs, if you will, but these, you do work in the kind of design meets representation. They're always often figures, black figures. How do you come up with the content for these things, or, in terms of content to go out to? What are how does the subject matter come to you for these? Is it based on commissions, or what is?
Yes, absolutely. So I find that with the flat paintings, I look for subject matters that encourages me. For example, this mask, I just did it, and the more I worked on it, the more the idea came. But this painting, I had to draw it out. This is encouraged by one of the leaders of the Haitian Revolution, Toussaint Louverture, who helped start the Haitian Revolution or put it on the map. And with a subject matter like that, I just planned it out, and I felt like I want to do a nice painting about Toussaint Louverture. I want to do a nice painting about Harriet Tubman. I've just been sketching out the idea in my head for a while. And because she's all over the news right now, I want mine to be kind of like its own voice. So it's going to take me a little while to sketch out what is Harriet Tubman in my mind, or how I want to make her iconic, for example. So as far as the flat work, I think that's how it works. I think of someone like Khalil Gibran that I really love, but the Lebanese poet, I eventually want to do a Khalil Gibran painting because I really like his writings, stuff like that. With the three-dimensional work. Go ahead.
Just to say, the influence of Harlem Renaissance is certainly available in the works itself, but they also, your color choices are just so insanely dynamic. And I wanted to kind of talk about, if I can also, if you just, I don't mind, I love hearing references because you actually are quite encyclopedic in your art historical reference points. Naja says the work's reminder of Jacob Lawrence. But I was also wondering, does it evolve over time? Have you, in terms of your kind of thinking through this, because you mentioned, the style, I've watched your style evolve and get even more crisp and even more iconic, if you will, like even more, it's almost like you're getting flatter and flatter as the years go on.
And simpler and simpler. And
simpler
I'm
and
definitely
simpler.
trying to get more iconic. I wanted to be able to, I want someone with a degree in art to be able to unpack it, but simultaneously, someone maybe from Haiti who sells hat for a living and doesn't have any education. I want them to also be able to unpack all the message that's in the work. And I find merging those two worlds to be sometimes difficult, especially when you have things like conceptual art, you know what I mean, that runs the world. I want the two worlds to be merged. So yes, I'm definitely trying to make it iconic and maybe easily read, but still packed with information.
I mean, I find them so amazing. Can I just ask also, this school is also just about artists making a life for themselves. And, we know it's not easy. Yes. And there's a lot of, like, how do you, as an artist who, I know you work hard constantly and you're fully dedicated to your art, but it's not always easy. What keeps you going? Is there tips, or what kind of practice have you developed over the years? I hate documentaries of people that were famous early on in their career because it doesn't give you any lessons of life for every artist that I know. But like, how do you kind of put one foot in front of the other to keep on a life as an artist?
Well, it's I remember when I was leaving art school 20 years ago, I started seeing the whole thing change, where the individual artists in the studio who make objects was frowned upon and tossed out the window, which is fine. And everything started becoming more collaborative performance, and people found multiple ways to make a living. And for me, I still preferred to leave me in my studio, let me work for a few months, and then I'll show the work and maybe sell something. I can understand why people don't want to do that anymore. But for me, it wasn't about the selling, the thing that mattered to me as much as the pleasure I got from making the work. So I think it depends. That question can be answered depending on what kind of artist you want to be. If you want to make objects, make beautiful things, make small things, then you have to figure out a way in a space to do so. And that has to be the only thing that matters.
Do you work every day, Claes?
I mean, I breathe every day. Yeah, this is my superpower. So I don't feel comfortable unless I'm using it. I really don't. I really don't.
It is your superpower. I'm not gonna.
I just don't feel right unless I'm using it. Just like someone who's got muscles want to do push-ups every day. I want to work on something every day. Yes.
I really appreciate that. I do want to also open it up. I know people putting stuff in the chat, but I really do want to open it up. I'm gonna ask one more question, then please think about some things because Claes is so available and interesting and awesome. I want to talk about Toussaint Louverture and your Haitian references. It does come up not only, obviously it's where you're from, but also it is a country with particular political history. It's the one country that successfully decolonized in the Western Hemisphere. It is a specific country in the Caribbean that's also the poorest in the Western Hemisphere. It is not, I've always felt like it is not accidental that it is both the number one decolonial country as well as the poorest country. Those things go hand in hand. And I wanted to know about the kind of impact that Haiti had on you, and also the historical and political knowledge that has stayed with you, because of course it is a very political country in its culture, outright.
Well, I think the best way for me to express how Haiti was for me is Edridge Dendycott's writing. She wrote Crick Crack and a couple other books, but when I read Crick Crack, it really blew me away. She sort of writes it from a Haitian American perspective, leaving Haiti and settling either in Miami or in New York. And even though we see all the political thing shift from the Duvalier to democracy, really all we remember is a colorful place with music, with flowers, with rhythms and all those things. So that's what Haiti has always been to me, because I left when I was 12, and that's what it will always be. And I've seen a lot of political shifts as I've gotten older, but I do think I will always probably paint my childhood, my adolescent years in Haiti. Like the painting behind me are 3 women at a market who are having a feisty conversation, which is an everyday scene. And I'm definitely frowning from doing more political work. I really don't like doing political work, to be honest. I've done work that's about the Haitian Revolution. I've done work that has lynchings. I've done work about police brutality. And those pieces are hard to birth. They're very difficult to birth. And I'm done with that, actually. I really look up to Picasso's Guernica. Like, he did so many paintings in preparation for that, and that blows me away. And it's such an amazing piece. And I've always wanted to do a war piece like that, but the war pieces take a lot out of me. And so as far as the political and what's going on in Haiti, I think I'm just gonna, I need to take a little break from that, just because it drains me, actually.
I appreciate that. And I think that's also good to go where your energy's at. I mean, mindful of your energy. Your superpower comes with energy needs, I suspect.
Yeah, we all got our kryptonite.
Yeah, I feel that. Hey, I'd love to open it up for some questions or thoughts from our esteemed community here. And I just want to quickly, we got plenty of time, but I want to, first of all, give a round of applause to Claes Gabriel and his awesome work.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Anybody want to jump in? Oh, go ahead, Allison.
Hi. I just want to thank you for saying that, the phrase, this is my superpower, and I just don't feel right unless I'm using it. I'm sure all of us have battled back and forth with this culture of productivity, and for me, I'm deep in that. And so this justification, just the green light of realizing that making is what you naturally do in your natural state when nothing is around you, and realizing that that's what you should do. And I just really appreciate that statement. And I also appreciate your comment about doing the political work and how that drains you and how it takes a lot out of you. And I also have been battling with the sort of conceptual push for work, and I'm deep in that. I really do feel there's so much to be said, but I also appreciate your green light on saying, I really appreciate those two realities for you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for the comments on that. And I think a lot of artists want a green light to make work in a way, because there's a lot of things that make you second guess yourself in a sense, or stop yourself. How do you push through that, just as a question? And then Teresa wants to show a mural that you did too. So after this, we'll go to Teresa and the mural showing. But how do you, there's a lot that can stop an artist from making, whether it's self-doubt, whether it's the heaviness of the political realities around us, whether it's a lack of faith in their own inspiration. When you battle with that, because every great artist does have inner demons.
Absolutely.
How do you push through, Claes?
I think it's a tough one, right? So I think that's a tough one. I think for me, I have to realize that ultimately there's no real standard out there. And I have to be honest with what I'm doing. And I have to be honest with when I'm being lazy. And I have to be honest because I'm the one who knows what I'm capable of.
Right.
It's, what is it? All research is me search, right? All research is I search. So it's like ultimately, even if I'm doing a painting about Medusa, it's really a self-portrait in a lot of ways. And that's the push that I'm pushing through is it's kind of like our therapy. We're really lucky in that way when we people that make things are really lucky in that way. So it's not as much as how I'm push myself. It's really more like I've set it up in a way where I have to.
That's awesome. Hey, Teresa, can you show them, can you jump in here and talk about the mural too? And
Yeah. I'll share can I share my screen? Yeah. I'll share my screen and show it. Claes, I wanted to show it because well, first of all, I think it's so beautiful and I haven't talked to you since I feel like the mural's been up and I was so impressed by how well your work translated to a mural. And I'd just love to hear, I know it's called Boat People. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And don't you have a smaller painting like this?
Yeah, there's a painting of the mural is inspired by a painting that is at the Fiddler Club, which is like in the vicinity of like 24th and Market. And the painting I did was inspired by that very book I mentioned earlier, Creek Crack, which chronicles the journey of Haitian immigrants that are fleeing Haiti, trying to land somewhere in Florida or Miami. But it specifically chronicles women and how much more difficult that journey is for women, young women. And it's very graphic. And I remember reading that book and was like, ooh, wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared for all that. And I was pitching some ideas to Jane at Mural Arts, and she really liked that painting. And we tried to find a wall that it could fit in an area where there were a lot of immigrants, where maybe, but I don't even know if people know it's about boat people. When I was working on the painting, I was thinking of a bouquet of flowers. I was thinking of the Haitian flag. I wasn't thinking of representing a ugly or traumatic scene of people on a boat. I was thinking of something that was budding, with the idea that immigrants and refugees bring all that beauty and all that budness to reality. So
it's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Congratulations. When did that go up?
This went up in the start of the pandemic, almost 2 years ago. Yeah.
Great. Congratulations. Megan, you have a question?
More of a comment. I just wanted to piggyback on some of Allison's comments of, saying thank you for the green light, but also just recognize that there's just such a feeling of love shared, of joy in your work. That is so important. And that I think just that is something that I think in this world where we feel so much pressure to get involved in say negative things or pull those out, I just want to recognize that the importance behind that and sharing that love and joy in your work. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Really awesome. Hey, one quick thing too. While I know that you had a tough time in grad school, can we talk about that briefly, Claes? Right? You felt like
not.
Right, because my memory served correctly. This is true, right?
We can, but if I would, yeah.
No, I don't mean that.
How about we talk about when I went to undergrad in Baltimore? It was next to the Visionary Art Museum, which is a museum dedicated to outsider artists. And it wasn't advertised. It wasn't something we talked about. I didn't find out about it till much later. Of course, I'm gonna have a hard time in grad school when that's my favorite museum. And it's, so it's not that I don't like the Whitney or the Met, but it's I love the museum where these guys were making art because they had to, because it helped them mentally and helped them deal with life. And they couldn't be taught that.
It is wild to me only in so much as you have such a deep art historical knowledge and love, and it shows in the work itself. But at the same time, I believe you were feeling like the instructors had a specific style they wanted to teach you that you were quite resistant
Oh,
to.
I just took 20 years, and I didn't just take 20 years. I also remember specifically saying, I don't need anything else. I already have 1960s Frank Stella. I have Aborigine art. I have African art. I have Japanese art. I really felt like I would be overloaded if I just kept learning. So I took some time off. I just took some time off. I knew I couldn't reverse having gone to art school like the visionary artists at that museum, but I knew I could take some time off and simply work on what I had already accumulated. And I've been sort of using that approach to this point. So when I went to art school, I remember people mentioning, do you know Nicholas Cave? And I was like, no, should I? And they were like, yeah, you should. And when I finally was introduced to his work, I fell in love with him. I was amazed, but in a lot of ways, I was grateful that I didn't know about him.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. I was grateful that
Of course.
we both came to, like, the standing statues remind me a lot of his work. And I was grateful that I didn't know much about him or never seen him. So grad school for me was something that I started. And when I started it, I realized, maybe I'm okay. Except you want to have a job, you want to teach, and you want to go from to an accredited school so you can be able to do those things. So that was the idea. You know, most colleges won't give you a job unless you have an MFA. So it goes back to that original question, how do you make a living? That was the reason why I attempted to go to grad school. I got tired of painting houses.
Yeah, I'll hear that. Amber, you got a point, question, thought, comment?
Hey, Claes. Thank
Hi.
you so much for your talk. It's really lovely hearing you talk about the joy of making. I have just kind of a question regarding your, like, you say you get into the studio every day and work, and I'm curious, where are the other aspects in your life where you find creative joy that kind of filters into the studio? Like some artists, they might, engage in dance practices. And we know, like from Janine's class, she talks about something called a parallel practice. So I'm curious about the other methods that you use, either in your studio itself or kind of around your studio that you see influencing your creative practice.
Well, to be clear, there's no studio. Like, I've never been able to separate the studio from home, right? I feel like as artists, we are investigators. Like an investigator carries a little pad. As soon as they get an idea, they write it down so they don't forget it. A writer has a typewriter right on where they sleep. So as soon as they wake up, they start typing, or they write it down and jot it down. So I've never been able to separate my studio from where I live, which is why I ended up spending 4, 5, 6 days out of the week if the studio is not at the home. So my studio right now is not far from where I sleep. It's in my home, and it's hard to separate the two. It's really hard to separate the two. This morning, I felt like in order for me to prepare for this, the best thing I could do is paint for 2 hours to prepare for this. That's the best thing. Because in doing so, it brought back everything I know about painting, because I'm applying it, implementing it all the time. But if I had tried to do anything else to prepare for this, I think I would have been off balance. So the studio to me is just as important as the cathedral to the priest. As it's the most important thing for me. It's the cornerstone of everything.
It's funny. We've got all artists here, and some of them work while they're in class, just because it's, I think art making is also not therapeutic. I hate that word. It's a mode of being, to the point. Therapy has a kind of connotation of healing,
right?
But it's also like to your point, breathing. It's like breathing. The making can be like breathing. I wanted to ask you too, and please, folks, chime in. I want to just ask you about exhibition opportunities in Philadelphia or as an artist, you know, we talked about it, Philadelphia being proximitous to New York, but it's also, it's not an easy world to crack in terms of sales and stuff like that. I was wondering, do you have, you know, do you work with a gallery? I mean, I know the answer, but I just wanted to kind of get your vibe on it.
You know,
Because
I have worked with
a lot of
galleries.
artists-
I
Yeah.
have worked with galleries and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've ran solo before. I'm running solo again. I've missed out of the whole idea of being part of someone's stable. That's what we used to call it back in the days. I remember back in the days, we would get rejection letters and post them on our wall, and we collected those as trophies. And
Mhm.
I've really been lucky. I've always felt like as long as you are making art and showing it, maybe perhaps things will eventually open up for a better venue. But then that wasn't always the goal for me. The goal was really, I want to do something because I understand art history a little bit, but I want to do something that can fit and contribute to that art historical conversation. And I want it to be really good. And if it's really good, then people are going to want to show it and maybe want to see it. And I really want to show once a year. I try to find a place to show once a year. And I'm really excited to be part of an upcoming group show at, I think it's called Center for Emerging Visual Artists, coming up soon. So I'm going to put 3-4 paintings, and I treat all these shows like it's the best show that I'm going to have. And I'm excited about it because it's COVID and it's going to be a real show. So yeah, I try to show once a year, at least once.
Well, everyone can relate to the pandemic being a tough time for real anything.
Right.
But of course, we appreciate that. And Claudia has a question, but also, Claudia, before your question, Allison also asked, what did you see as the benefits of being in someone's stable? Like, what would be the perks of that?
The perks is they're going to make sure your rent's paid. They're going to make sure you have a studio to paint because they want you to keep painting. And so there's stability there's a lot of stability. They're going to make sure you have supplies, but then there's a lot of responsibility. You're going to be less likely to explore and experiment. So there are advantages and there are disadvantages.
Cloudy, you have a question. Let's go to you.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for showing us your
Hi.
amazing work. I love how you said that each drop of paint contains time, and I struggle with time a lot. I think we all are. I wish you could talk more about that, but I think getting to my question, I think also each drop of paint contains beauty in your work. And I just wonder how you feel about beauty, because it is like time, such a difficult subject as contemporary artists to tackle. So yeah, how if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, Khalil Gibran, somebody who has really encouraged me, I think he said something like, all of life is a search of beauty. Everything else is a form of waiting. Everything else is a form of waiting. He was really big on beauty. When confronted, he was asked, if you had a chance, would you erect a statue for liberty? He said, no, think about all the blood that has been shed for liberty. And that changes from side to side, but I would erect a statue for beauty. And that's gorgeous to me, and that's the idea. Like, if I had a choice, would I do a painting about Toussaint Louverture or the Haitian Revolution, or would I do a painting about beauty? I would rather do a painting about beauty. And as far as time is concerned, the more detailed, the more beautiful, the more intricate that painting is, it just captures the 2 years, the 6 months that we worked on it, or it's just a way of capturing that time. And when you think of Renaissance artists, they spent years in those paintings, and that's why we still celebrate them. And I feel like we most of my paintings, the most I spend on them is 6-7 months straight every day. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like if I spent a whole 2 years on a painting. I don't think I have the mindset for it. It would drive me nuts, by the way. But I do think their way of capturing time, our pieces of work, and maybe also capturing beauty if we're lucky.
Thanks for the
Can I
question,
say
Cloudy.
Nate,
Of
can I
course,
say one more thing?
I know you, Cloudy. I knew that was coming, of course.
I don't know, because I mean, I was a terrible student, so I don't know much about art history, but the way something is playing in my head when I look at your painting and I see how you went from a much more intricate form with your masks to, you know, kind of like distilling forms on the canvas. And I see how, I don't know, there's a back and forth in my head that I see how, you know, Art Deco, Cubism, Art Nouveau, they all kind of blend together. And as though those took from, you know, African art. And then it seems like you're filtering through that and then bringing it back into its African origin. I don't know, there's something really, I think talking about the political, I think, you know, you don't have to do anything political.
Yeah, can I say something briefly on that point? When you go to Haiti, there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Haiti. We are 70% Catholic, 30% Protestant, 100% Voodoo." The idea is that all these religions are like the surface cultural thing that we project, but we are all this. So in art school, I knew this was the case with every Haitian. So it was easy for me to accept, embrace, and fall in love with the Art Deco era of art. Like completely fall in love with it. I mean, how elegant and gorgeous Art Deco is. So what you're saying is completely true. I love Cubism, I love Art Deco, I love all that stuff. And I wasn't worried about losing any of my ethnicity, losing any of my Blackness, losing anything, because I know that's who I am down deep in the bone. So I embrace all those things, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you, Cloudy, and thank you, Claes. Amber, you're going to jump in.
Sorry to do this envy the DJ of it. I have a question. We've been kicking around this idea of kind of like the power of just making something beautiful and well constructed and spending time on that. And today I just happened to be thinking about like the rise of the Industrial Revolution and how it kind of caused humanity to stop being the producers of items that we use in everyday life, and that gave that power to the machine, and how we have now like become people who push buttons and who push papers, and there's this loss of physical making, and there's this sadness of it. And so while we're, you know, thinking about the political of it being part of the practice or not part of the practice, my question to you is, do you think the act of just being an artist and spending 6 months on a painting, is that inherently political in an industrialized society?
Everything we do as artists is political, but I find that to be more spiritual first than anything, because ultimately we're trying to better the way we think outside of our own boxes, our own parameters. And there's nothing more political than that. That's why the artists were always the first ones pushed out when there's a dictator, the poets, the artists, because when you are dealing with the realm of art, there is no parameters, there are no walls. So there is nothing more political than that. There is truly nothing more political than that.
Well, listen, I want to say, let's give it up for Claes. Thanks so much, buddy. I really appreciate your time, your work.
Thank you so much.
If people want to be in touch, yeah, totally, Teresa. What a great note to end on. If people want to be in touch, can we get them your contact info or whatever, Claes?
Yeah, my website is down right now, but you can find me on Instagram, and you know, people's been reaching out to me right now with everything that's been going on. It's like I'm trying to get back on my feet, and COVID, you know, all that stuff. But people can reach me through Instagram if they want to get in touch. Absolutely.
All right, well, we'll hit him up, blow up his DMs. Claes, thank you so much. Teresa, if you want to introduce the
Teaching
tea
artists
time too as well.
around the